Let's watch one of Stacey Dooley's clean. And Billy Fizz, what about Billy Fizz? Yeah, we'll watch the new one with Brian. Let's watch Billy Fizz. Yeah. Okay. Now, it's not
Yeah. Hey, sorry, I don't know what's
Okay,
the question.
can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you hear me, yeah?
Yep. Loud and clear. Hope you can hear me too.
My side's okay. Okay.
Yep.
If you say hello, please.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, I can hear you.
Yeah.
We might have to repeat over some of the previous questions, but
no worries.
I can still hear you. Okay, so yeah, first and foremost, if you would like to introduce yourself to the community, it'd be much appreciated.
Hi.
Please.
No worries. My name's Deji. I'm 27. I'm the founder of the Essay Advisor. I founded this platform to help university students achieve, their goals academically in sociology, criminology, other social science subjects, and international politics. During criminology and a master. I currently work as an employment consultant where my company has a contract with the government to help people get back into work. But I will be starting a new job in the very near future as a youth, helping rehabilitate. That's me.
Well, thank you so much for that. And yeah, what I would love to ask is in regards to education and the factor of investment, what would you think would be the best solutions of next steps to make sure we sort out the crisis that we are going through?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one, students should focus as much as getting their grades, but I think students should also focus on joining societies and networking. If there's anything I wish I could do and go back in time, is that I wish I did more networking. So joining societies is the best way to do that because you don't know who you're going to meet. So I think that's definitely something on the student side that you can do. You can basically network for free. But on the university side, obviously you're paying £9,250 or up to £9,250 a year. What I would suggest is if universities were to literally speak to employers, your Deloitte, your KPMGs, the NHS, what other organizations there are, and ultimately have maybe more graduate schemes or placement schemes or something at the end of the degree to look forward to, or things that they could do in the degree and get some practical advice. Like, I don't know, for people that are doing finance, maybe they could spend able to form partnerships or allegiances with hiring companies dependent on the field that they work in. So if a law department at a university were to partner up with law firms, and then sometime during the course, the class could go and see and could go into a law firm and see what a day in the life of a barrister is like, and potentially have some jobs guaranteed waiting at the end for the best performing students. I think that would really incentivize students to work even harder. So that would be my response.
Thank you so much. And what would you say about the infrastructure of like schools and prisons in your personal view?
Could you just repeat that? You cut out. So you said infrastructure of what in prisons?
Schools and prisons, because I know that I've heard in the report prisons are really quite ghastly at the moment, and even schools, some places could be more fit for purpose.
So I think schools should teach things that children will use. Like, I'm 27, I've never had to use Pythagoras theorem. And unless I'm going to be an architect, I'm never going to use Pythagoras theorem. I've never needed to use trigonometry. One thing I have needed to know is tax, credit score, how to buy a house, plumbing, how to fit a kitchen, how to do flooring. These are life skills that would be much more helpful to children growing up. So I think there needs to be a reform of what is taught in the curriculum. I'm not saying that maths, English, and science is bad. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those core subjects, but I do think personal finance should be an issue. I do think personal finance should be taught. I do think money management should be taught. I do think how to understand your taxes should be taught. I do think things like inflation, so that children don't go up into the real world and just, start asking questions like, oh, what's a mortgage? What's an ISA? What does interest rate mean? So I think that would be with regards to schools. But with regards to prison, the problem with prison is that prisons unfortunately aren't doing their job in terms of rehabilitating people, right? As I said, prison does a fantastic job at locking people away, but once the individual has come out, if they have not improved or added value to themselves in any way, shape, or form, it's very, very likely that they're going to go and turn a life of crime. So I think prisons and interventions should be centered around trying to help the individual move away from a life of crime. So I think there should be more, if there were more youth clubs in the society that could help people, but I think that could help people not enter prison in the first place. But I also think that there needs to be more initiatives focused on helping to reintegrate people back into society. Most companies, even if you don't have a record, it's hard to get a job. So let alone you do have a criminal record. So I think if there were more organizations, like Ban the Box, for example, it's a organization that help people with criminal records find jobs. I think if there were more organizations like that working in prison and outside of prison, I think people would have less stigma towards people or towards employees who have been convicted in the past.
Thank you so much for that. And what are you currently doing to support your community? Is there anything you would like to share that people should be aware of?
I guess academically, community can mean so many things. So academically, I provide practical support to people who need help with their essays, whether that be postgraduates, so setting down the formula needed to write a successful essay, piece of coursework, or dissertation. Outside of that, I guess my church community, I'm a member where I try to help the um at, at my church, I try and take on more responsibilities by helping plan and organize some of the things. Well, the teens church, I should say, at a church called Winners Chapel, I've been able to help facilitate the youth group sessions and ultimately equip them, you know, the adults that they want to be. What else is there? I'm trying to think what else is there. But I think this new job that I'm into is something that I'm really passionate and excited about. And this is where I think I'll be able to have the most impact. So directly working with young offenders and rehabilitate them and make them aware of the services that they're entitled to, and ultimately make crime less attractive. So by developing what's the one by developing really good interpersonal skills and communication skills, you're able to get through to these young people and ultimately have them turn away from a life of crime and see that this isn't going to enhance their life or add value to them as an individual. I'm also part of a group. I don't know if I think you've heard of them. What Matters CIC. My very good personal friend Joanna Briggs is the CEO of that organization, and just helping. So what they do, they're a social enterprise that help people with their personal finance, help them develop confidence, and ultimately networking. So just helping individuals where I can, build their personal brand, if you will, become more network literate, if that makes sense, and ultimately do what they can to put themselves in the best position to find a better job or their dream job. So yeah, I know that was quite that was quite long.
No, thank you very much. And what I would love to ask within like the criminal justice, how do you feel about the equity in that area of field, especially for offenders? Do you feel that they are represented, or do you think that could be an area of improvement?
So when you say, do I feel young offenders are represented, do you mean, and like, do I feel like their voices are heard?
Yes, and also in the perspective of the judges and the kind of equal opportunity of, I think, diversity and also inclusion.
Gotcha. Okay, so Black people, unfortunately, are ridiculously overrepresented in prison, young Black males in particular. The prison that I used to work at, Feltham Young Offenders, like a lot of the people inside the prison were Black, but the people actually running the prison and making decisions were white. So it can be very difficult. I think in terms of diversity, I think we've still got to go. And of course, I think there are many, 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 many issues that need to be broken. Like the system, unfortunately, does suffer from institutional racism. So I think there are many layers, many more conversations, and I think many people with a similar mindset have to come together to be able to break down those barriers. That being said, of course, if we compare prisons now to 20, 30 years ago, young offenders, I think, definitely have more of a say now than in any time of society. Excuse me. And I think I think we're moving in an era. I think we live in a society where people don't think people are going to prison and they're just having the time of their lives. So I say all this to say, I think there's a lot of good things, or I think there are some good things about prison, but I definitely feel that there needs to be much more. And I think the focus of prisons all across the UK, and if not all over the world, shouldn't be on punishing people, but should be on trying to reform people and give them the help that they need. So, yeah.
I'm interested in, thank you so much for that, first and foremost, but I'm interested in also knowing when you talked about rap or kind of making creative opportunities in prisons. What's your kind of view on that and how could it be delivered?
So anything that keeps people. There was one pastor. I mean, I don't go to SPAC Nation. I'm not the biggest fan of SPAC Nation, but the lead pastor, Pastor Toby, said something very interesting, and that stuck with me. And that probably will stick with me for the rest of my life. And he said, I can't tell a criminal to stop being a criminal and not provide them an alternative economy to legally make money. I 100% agree with that, right? So if I'm going to tell someone to stop doing this, I do think you have to give him or her a better alternative, right? So the reason is because a lot of artists, or let me not say a lot, a number of artists that people listen to have gone into prison. I've talked, about their time in prison, and have ultimately, I think I listed some earlier, but people like J Hus, Bigga D, Fredo, I think Tion Wayne. There's a lot of rappers who have been to prison but have become very successful, and a lot of these young offenders, listen to their music. So having I think having a space where people can make music and write about their pain, their frustration, what they're going through, I think not only keeps them busy and also gives them something to look forward to, but ultimately provides them a potential economy for them to make money legitimately. And I think that is what prisons should be doing. Prisons should be encouraging to get the best out of the young people inside and be doing everything they can to harness that potential. Sending someone to prison for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and locking away the key is not going to do the offender any harm, and it's not going to do society any harm when that individual comes out, because he or she has not gained any skills, he or she probably hasn't added any value to themselves, and he or she is probably going to come out worse than they went in. So, yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. No, it does. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I would love to ask, on the perspective of artificial intelligence and society, human capacity, what's your view?
I mean, artificial intelligence, I think, is growing, but I don't think it's going to replace all our jobs. Like, there's only so much artificial intelligence can do, right? I think one thing that keeps businesses, or one thing people like about businesses, is that human interaction, right? So I don't think, of course, things like warehouse and retail, potentially, of course, you could see artificial intelligence coming in, but being a lawyer, being a doctor, what other jobs? A plumber. I think people would still, a mechanic, people would still prefer to have a human being deal with those jobs, right? So, what's the word I'm looking for? Personally, I'm not scared of this. I'm not scared of the proliferation of artificial intelligence and how AI seems to be making tasks a lot easier. I think it's a good thing, and I think it can make businesses more proficient. But I don't think we'll be seeing, at least anytime soon, in the next 5 or so years, I think people's jobs are safe. But that's just me.
Thank you, and thank you for that share. I would love to ask, in regards to mental health and also your own mental health, what do you feel? Do you feel like our community is supported, or do you think there should be more support in that area?
So it's interesting. So I did an IG live on this last year. And yes, of course, as you can see, I'm a black man, born in Nigeria. I think speaking about topics of health, most, I can't say all, I can't speak for all Nigerians, I can't speak for all Africans, but I think most Africans, especially West Africans, especially Nigerians, when it came to mental health, that wasn't something we could talk about freely in our household, because our parents, when they came to this country, they just thought about making it. They came in a time where they had no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. So I don't think they had the capacity to be able to deal with whatever mental issues they had. They just had to survive, by any means necessary. So of course, speaking to my parents about mental health would have been very, very difficult. Universities do have, at least from what I've known, is the vast majority of universities do have somewhere on campus where people, or mental health team or mental health unit, where people can speak to a trained counselor or a psychologist if they're feeling some sort of way, or in addition to that, I also stated earlier the importance of joining societies, which could be a really good way to improve your mental health. In terms of my mental health, I don't know. I've never really sat down, I guess, and asked myself that question. I've always assumed, that I'd consider myself fine, but I think because of the culture and context that I've grown up in, it's just not something I guess I've really paid attention to. You know, it would have been very difficult to speak to my parents and I guess and other fellow Black people about mental health because it's just something that unfortunately is seen as taboo, especially as a man. But we know that Black men are three times more likely, or men are three times more likely to commit suicide than women. So, of course, I think it is something that we do talk about more. My friend Sean Flores is doing absolutely unbelievable things, talking about OCD and mental health and his experiences with mental health. So big up, big up Sean Flores. I have a lot of love for him. But yeah, I think if we have more conversations, more open dialogue about the topic, I think it is becoming more and more prevalent in mainstream media, which I think is the first sign. And it can only go onwards and upwards. So yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And what would be your 3 top tips for others that are listening in regards to life from your perspective?
Life. That's a very big question. Don't try and do too many things, stick to one thing, right, and try and master that. Because if you try and be a jack of all trades, you're going to waste a lot of resources, waste a lot of energy, and ultimately waste a lot of time. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. So I'd always say commit things into the life or commit things into the hands of God. And the last one, it sounds a bit cliche, but I always say believe in yourself. I tell people if you don't believe in your source, how can someone else believe? If you yourself don't believe in your source, how can you expect someone else to believe in your source, right? So you have to be your biggest cheerleader, even if no one is cheering you on. So if I'm not mistaken, what's his name? Michael Jordan got cut from his basketball team, but he didn't let that stop him. This example is a bit extreme. 50 Cent, I don't know if you've seen Get Rich or Die Trying, but 50 Cent, got shot 9 times. And I'm not saying you should go and get shot 9 times. I'm not saying people should, go and join a gang. But the reason I use 50 Cent is that individual, he has been able to use a very, very traumatic experience, very, very painful experience. And even when he said he wanted to be a rapper, everybody around him in the gang that he was in laughed at him, didn't believe him, belittled him, etc., etc. But he knew the bars that he could write. He knew his talent, and pursued it. And look what 50 Cent has been able to achieve. So those would be my 3 tips. Pick one thing. So pick a niche and try and be as creative, funny, innovative, and add value within that thing as possible. As a Christian, I'd always say commit all your plans to God and believe in yourself. People will always say what they want to. That's fine. Stay focused on what it is that you want to achieve. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those examples. I would love to also ask, how do you feel the best solutions would be within this current cost of living crisis of public sectors and within the kind of balance between domestic and international, from your personal view?
Could you repeat that question? Could you just repeat that again, please?
Sure. So how would you feel would be the best way of tackling the balance between domestic and international affairs?
The best way of tackling. Well, I think as governments, there's unfortunately always going to be trade-offs that they have to make, right? I'll give you an example. If I was Prime Minister, I would clamp down on tax avoidance massively. Like, so many wealthy billionaires are avoiding tax at alarming rates. Amazon, Google, Starbucks, you name it, they're all avoiding tax, right? But because of the loopholes there are in the tax system. That being said, if Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister was to come down harder on people who are avoiding tax, these people, your Jeff Bezos, for example, are massive employers of labor, right? So if Rishi Sunak was to say to Jeff Bezos, you're avoiding too much tax, I'm changing the rule, therefore you must pay our tax, Jeff Bezos could turn around and say, you know what, I don't like that. And he could liquidate all or a lot of his UK companies, which would immediately make a lot of people unemployed, and in turn would make people go on to seek job seekers allowance, which would cost the economy even more money. So I use that example to say governments will always have to choose something to forego something. I see why, because of the cost of living crisis and because that is facilitated or been exacerbated by Putin's egregious war in Ukraine, I can understand and I have sympathy as to why Boris Johnson and now Rishi Sunak are making that a priority, because Vladimir Putin needs to get out. There will be no Soviet Union 2.0, and Ukraine is an independent country. I just think that when you sit down and look at the wealth that's in this country, we shouldn't be needing food banks. Wealth, unfortunately, in this country isn't redistributed evenly. And when you've got people, you've got so many MPs, especially during the pandemic, that were, I don't want to say embezzling funds, but misappropriating funds. I don't think money has been spent wisely over the last the last 13 years of conservative rule, but I think especially over the last 2 or 3 years, money has not been spent wisely. So I say all that to say there will always be trade-offs between national affairs and domestic affairs. But I think when engaging in international policies, it shouldn't affect what we do at home because of the wealth that this country has. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And within you saying about the war in Ukraine, what is your view on the effect of what's happened in southern Eastern Europe, and within the possibility of atomic plates or either the possibility of geoscience I don't know if you're aware of geoscience, geographic science, which they are looking into controlling the weather, which apparently is explained not to be used right now. However, there has been certain satellites sent up to space on one hand, and then also the atomic plates that may affect other countries. What's your view on the recent situation?
I think it's terrible. And it's very important that Vladimir Putin leaves the country immediately, indefinitely, and this man is made to answer for his crimes. In addition to what you said, this is the closest time this world has been to nuclear warfare, right? Nuclear weapons have only been used once before. Harry Truman dropped the atomic bomb in 1945 in Japan. 2 atomic bombs. And obviously Japan after that just completely moved or completely withdrew itself from the war. So I think the biggest issue is that this standoff, if Vladimir Putin refuses to budge, this potentially, and he has spoken about nuclear warfare, this could, unlikely, but this could lead to nuclear warfare, which would literally lead to the end of humanity as we know it. So, Ukraine are an independent sovereign nation. Vladimir Putin is trying to recreate a Soviet Union 2.0, so to speak. He doesn't want Ukraine or any other neighboring nations to join NATO. He's come out on camera. I can't remember how long ago, but he said that the biggest demise or the biggest travesty in history was the fall of the was the fall of the Soviet Union. And as a former KGB soldier himself, so the KGB were basically the USSR equivalent to the Gestapo, Hitler's secret police. I don't understand, but he thinks what he's doing is correct because he's trying to separate the West from Eastern Europe and intrude on people's sovereignty. So this guy's just a very power-hungry dictator, and I just hope that this man is made to answer for his crimes.
Thank you so much for that. I want to come from a neutral bias point of view.
Okay.
And what's your view on the fact of the concerns that some people may have on the Ukraine president asking for more arms and of how that may have an effect, or there may be other factors that may arise? What's your view on that?
I guess personally, I will obviously try and encourage diplomats to work things out without going to war. But when someone has illegally invaded your country, there's no talk. I don't think there's any other room for negotiation. President Zelensky has tried to reason with Vladimir Putin, but I can't remember who said it. But you can't reason with terrorists. And Vladimir Putin is hell-bent on remaining in Ukraine. So I'm all in support of sending arms and whatever weaponry Ukraine need to be able to drive out Russian forces from the capital and basically out of Ukraine.
Okay, thank you so much. Last question is, what do you think the future is going to look like for the next generation, especially with like the climate element and also within the future for youth and
That is such a good question. Wow. My hair's going to go grey. I don't know. I think the good thing is younger people are now much more politically aware than they've ever been. We have so much knowledge, and we're in this internet age where people are more politically and socially aware than they've ever have been, right? So I think people have a better understanding of politics and international affairs. I think the bad news is that there's so many security threats. I don't know if you know, like TikTok, for example. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is, I think, is by a state-owned business. And because it's owned by the Chinese government, or because it's owned by the Chinese state, TikTok have to, by law, be able to relinquish the data of the individual to the Chinese government as and when they are, right? So nuclear warfare looks like a more and more likely. What else is there? And in addition to, I just think we live in a very, very sensitive society where people are easily offended. I think we've lost the ability to have difference of opinions and logically have debates. If I say something that someone doesn't like, they're quick to cancel. We have difference of opinions. I have no problem with you having a different opinion, but I want to be able to sit down and defend my point of view, and you sit down and defend your point of view. But now, because of Twitter and all these social media platforms, just literally tweet something and you can immediately destroy someone's livelihood just because you don't like what they said. They may have not necessarily said anything offensive, but just because you didn't like it, you can end their livelihood and end their career. So, but yeah, I don't know. I hope that I don't know if that answers your. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And thank you so much for your time. And I think, it was a really beneficial discussion. And it was really great to hear about what you were doing and your perspective on things. And before this ends, and thank you to everyone who's joined, by the way, is there anything else you would like to share, or any last statement you would like to share to everyone, or wisdom or advice?
I mean, check out my business page, the SA Advisor. So the SA Advisor, if you need any, thank you all for joining, and don't be afraid of your opinion. I think that would be all I have to say. So, yeah.
Well, thank you to everyone, and thank you very much to our guests as well for sparing your time today. And see you all until the next Instagram Live.
All right. Thank you again for inviting me. Bye.
You're welcome.